The Galactic Academy for Extraordinary Combative Arts was neither extraordinary nor particularly combative. It was, in fact, a bureaucratic accident stacked on top of an architectural crime scene. The campus stretched across 3 artificial moons and half of a broken asteroid, all connected by high-speed grav tubes that only worked on days ending in a prime number. Lecture halls were built to accommodate species with no legs, only to then install stairs. Cafeterias offered nutrient sludge compatible with over 700 known digestive systems, none of them human, which was probably the point. Human applicants weren't invited, they were tolerated, and in Class 17Z there was exactly one. She stood quietly at the rear of the daily combat lecture, flanked by 3 hulking Skarnak brawlers and a cluster of psionic mist forms that shimmered when annoyed. Her uniform was too big, her boots were scratched, and her expression betrayed nothing. No one knew her name, no one asked. Not because she was intimidating, she wasn't. She was short, pale, and looked like the kind of mammal you'd find reading quietly in a bunker while others ran screaming. But she had one fatal trait. She wasn't afraid. At the front of the class, the instructor was trying, and failing, to demonstrate a 3-limb takedown on a volunteer with 4 limbs. The volunteer's species lacked knees, which complicated things. "Incorrect form," the AI assistant droned from the ceiling. "Your hold is incompatible with the subject's thorax cluster." "I know that," barked the instructor, sweat dripping down his spines. "I'm improvising." Chaos was standard here. The academy had been created as a cross-species elite martial environment by beings who had never actually met most of the enrolled species. What they got instead was a swirling blend of combatants, egos, and customs that collided daily like poorly programmed drones. It wasn't a school, it was a reality show with bruises. Which brings us to Dravnok. Every class has one. The apex predator, 7 foot something, covered in scale armor and evolutionary bad decisions, born on a deathworld, tail like a whip, teeth like a documentary, muscles layered on more muscles, probably just to fill out paperwork. He was what the Academy called a combat specimen of statistical dominance, and he loved it. Dravnok had made his way to the front of every sparring rotation by either roaring louder or simply flattening his opponents. It didn't matter if they had venom, wings, or energy blades. Dravnok would suplex them into the wall and ask if anyone else wanted to try. No one did, except her. Except she didn't try. She didn't challenge. She didn't posture. She didn't even flinch. Dravnok hated that. The first time he noticed her, she was just standing silently during drills, arms folded, eyes watching, not studying technique, just waiting. He stomped past her and snarled. Nothing. He slammed his training partner into the mat, inches from her boots. Still nothing. On the 3rd day, he approached her directly. "You are human," he hissed, teeth inches from her ear. She didn't respond. "You are soft," he growled. She tilted her head, ever so slightly. "You do not belong here." And then she spoke, just once. "You talk too much." That almost broke him. Almost. He decided she would learn fear. So Dravnok began his own private campaign. During simulation drills, he'd circle closer to her side of the arena, always looming. In the hallways, he'd bump shoulders, accidentally, of course, and watch for a flinch. In the mess hall, he'd drop his empty nutrient tubes on her tray without looking. Nothing, not once. The girl didn't respond with anger, or fear, or anything. She simply existed, calmly, like an unshakable piece of gravity lodged in the gut of the class. By week 3, the instructors began to notice. By week 4, so did the surveillance AIs. Then came the day of the group combat evaluation, the Academy's attempt at a multi-species exercise, 1 squad per team, randomized, evaluated under fire, in theory. In practice, it was Dravnok's favorite game, public humiliation. His team drew the human girl, lucky him. The instructor briefed them, bored. 1 round. First team to disable the other in under 60 seconds gets a full tactical bonus. "Excellent," Dravnok grinned. "I accept surrender." The girl tightened the strap on her gloves. He stared at her, sizing her up for the 5th time that day. Thin, light, no exoskeleton, no tail, no visible armor enhancements, just short black hair and unremarkable grey eyes. She looked like someone's niece, not a warrior. He stepped forward. "Face me," he said, chest out, arms open. I want to see what your soft little bones are made of. The instructor paused. Cadet, you may decline. The girl looked at Dravnok, then nodded once, stepped onto the mat. The other cadets stopped breathing. Even the mist forms condensed into a tighter mass. Dravnok bared his fangs. I will give you one chance to... No, she said. He blinked. What? She repeated it calmly. No. Then she moved. But that's part two. Because what followed was not a fight. It was a lesson. One the entire academy and the rest of the galaxy would never forget. Dravnok wasn't worried. The mat beneath his feet creaked as he rolled his shoulders and flexed the claws on his dominant hand. His armored tail swung lazily behind him. The usual. Everything about him, his species, his training, his ego, told him this would be over in seconds. The human girl across from him. She didn't even raise her fists. She stood with her arms loose, fingers twitching just once, like she was remembering the shape of something she'd already broken. Begin, the instructor called, sounding more curious than confident. Dravnok lunged. He moved like a freight train with anger issues, massive momentum, coiled power, full commitment, which made her next move borderline rude. She stepped sideways, not dodged, not ducked, just took a casual step. His strike missed her shoulder by millimeters, claws slicing the air with a high-pitched whistle. Before he could recover, her left hand tapped the back of his knee, and then she rotated. Her body spun, twisting low around his center of gravity, faster than any apex predator in the room could process. The first thing to hit the mat was his knee, the second was his elbow, the third was him, full mass, down, back first, flat, 6 seconds, no sound, no dramatic yell, no war cry. The girl stood over him, adjusting the cuffs of her sleeves. She didn't even look at the crowd. She looked at him. He blinked up at her, dazed. She said one word. Now you listen. The room didn't erupt. It imploded. There was a stunned silence so thick even the AI assistant paused its recording log. One of the mist-form students let out a surprised ripple that translated roughly to, "Holy asteroid pancakes." Vorgath, who had returned to observe the assessment, was speechless, a feat considered physically impossible due to his 4 mouths. The human girl turned, stepped off the mat, and sat back down on the bench like nothing had happened. Dravnok didn't move. It took 5 minutes before anyone dared speak. It took 10 before the instructor remembered how to breathe. Dravnok, slowly and with great confusion, sat up. He rubbed his throat, flexed his claw. You broke my grip, he mumbled, voice hoarse, before I even landed it. She didn't reply. She didn't need to. Later that evening, in the Academy's surveillance review chamber, 4 instructors and 2 security analysts replayed the moment in slow motion, again, and again, and again. She used his overextension, one instructor muttered. She exploited joint positioning without leverage, said another. She humiliated him, said the security analyst flatly. The footage paused on the exact moment Dravnok hit the mat, tail twisted, limbs crumpled, eyes wide. She never blinked, murmured the lead trainer. The room went quiet. By morning, the footage had leaked. Not officially. But cadets talk. Surveillance records have gaps, and someone, probably the mist form, uploaded a still frame of the aftermath titled, "Soft-Skinned Assassin vs. Lizard Hulk. You won't believe what happens next." Within 2 hours, every training ring on campus had replayed it. Within 4, versions of it had spread to 3 other moons. By sundown, a new phrase trended across 7 cadet forums, "Don't poke the quiet ones." Dravnok didn't return to class for 2 days. When he did, he was quiet, not ashamed, not defeated, just recalibrated. He avoided eye contact, took his seat in silence, and when the instructor asked for a volunteer during the next sparring demo, he didn't move, but he did glance at her and nod, just once. She didn't return it. That night, in a sealed chamber beneath the Academy's central administrative tower, an emergency session was called. 12 beings, all high-ranking, all different species. In front of them, a paused video still, the moment of impact, Dravnok's defeat. The title read, "Human Combat Protocol, Unspecified Variant." One of the analysts clicked his beak nervously. "Request to re-evaluate human classification on the Galactic Combat Index," he said, "currently listed at 4.7. Someone grunted. Raise it to what? A pause. Then the analyst whispered, unknown. But higher. Meanwhile, the girl sat on the rooftop of dorm block B, watching stars. Dravnok's voice still echoed in her head. You are soft. She flexed her fingers, looked at the bruise blooming under her knuckle. It would fade. They always did. But people remembered moments. And that one? That one was going to echo through 1,000 battle halls. The Galactic Academy didn't have an official policy for when one of their top-tier combat cadets was folded like a lawn chair by a 5'4" human girl, so it improvised. And like all bureaucracies forced to admit a mistake, it responded not with reflection, but with paperwork. At 0900 standard, 3 different administrative branches submitted internal queries marked urgent, red-flagged combat anomaly. By 0930, the Academy's central AI was rerouted to dig into the girl's records. At 0934, it froze. Her file wasn't incomplete. It was heavily classified. Every attempt to open her background returned one of 2 warnings. Clearance required, level 9 or above. Or worse, request logged, your action has been recorded. The instructor who submitted the request suddenly found himself audited for 5 unrelated expense reports. He didn't try again. Behind closed doors, speculation exploded. She's special forces, someone said. She's genetically enhanced, guessed another. Earth must have trained her for assassination ops. But the truth was sitting cross-legged in the academy courtyard, feeding nutrient bars to a nervous 3-eyed cadet while explaining how to fall without breaking your spine. They didn't understand, because no one asked. No one thought to ask why she moved like she did, or fought like she knew exactly what her opponent would try next. No one realized what it took to fight the way she did. Cold, clean, efficient. Because most of them came from war-forged species with ceremonial blades and multi-generational grudges. Not suburbs, not old gym mats, not decades of repetition so precise it rewrote your nervous system. Back on Earth, in a forgotten corner of Arizona, was a gas station. Behind it, a shed. And in that shed, a dojo. Not a fancy one. No touchscreen interface. Just an old mat, scuffed mirrors, and a man in his 70s who believed discipline was sacred. Her grandfather. He didn't fight wars. He didn't serve in covert programs. He just trained anyone who walked in and trained her hardest of all. She was 9 when he first tossed her on her back and said, again. She was 10 when she broke her wrist and didn't cry. She was 11 when she stopped flinching. She was 16 when she didn't lose a match for an entire year. And she was 17 when she applied to the Galactic Academy, not because Earth sent her, but because she wanted to prove she belonged anywhere. In the meantime, the Academy's internal politics began to boil. Vorgath filed an official evaluation. Subject demonstrates non-linear combat logic, species adaptive response calibration, and emotionally detached engagement. Recommendation: transfer to advanced tactical development. The recommendation was denied, and then overridden. The transfer order came down 48 hours later. A shuttle, private, destination, Orbital Training Annex X9. Only 6 students had ever been selected for it. 5 of them became instructors. The 6th vanished. She didn't seem surprised. When her name was called, she stood, gathered her gear, paused once, looked over her class. No farewell, no grand speech. Just a nod to Dravnok. He nodded back, respectful, humbled. She left. Across the academy, monitors flickered. The footage of the fight had gone viral in unofficial channels. The human girl's name was still redacted. But the message? Clear. Earth doesn't need to shout. Earth just needs one quiet girl who doesn't blink. Meanwhile, in a dim conference room on Station Telis 4, a group of off-world military observers watched the video on loop. One leaned forward. She was holding back. No one disagreed. Another asked the question hanging in the air. What happens when she stops? The shuttle to Annex X9 didn't have windows. Elaine noticed. She also noticed the guards didn't speak, the security fields didn't buzz, and the flight crew had deliberately left her alone. Even the cabin AI only answered when directly addressed, and then only with one word: affirmative. This wasn't a promotion, it was containment. The galaxy didn't know what to do with a human like her, so it put her somewhere remote, controlled, and quiet. Annex X9 didn't look like an academy outpost. It looked like an unfinished bunker floating above a dead moon. Everything was made of grey composite plating. The halls echoed. The air smelled recycled 5 times over. There were no banners, no motivational slogans, no grand tour, just a plain door with a plaque that read, Tactical Variant Program, Ghost Division. Inside, 4 beings turned to look at her. One was a hexapedal insectoid twice her size. One floated 6 inches above the ground and hummed at a frequency that hurt her teeth. One looked like a discarded cloak filled with shadow, and the 4th was human, older, lean, scarred, calm. "You're late," he said. She checked her chrono. "I'm 2 minutes early." The man nodded. "Exactly. We expected you to show up yesterday. That's what paranoia looks like. You're not paranoid enough." She stared at him for a beat. Then, "Yet." He smiled. "Good answer." They didn't train in drills. They trained in silence, in pitch-black chambers, in VR simulations based on real-world war crimes, in puzzle scenarios with no win conditions. The others struggled. She did not. They gave her a test called the Red Room Simulation. Objective: survive for 5 minutes against 7 advanced AI-controlled enemies in an enclosed space. Everyone else used tactics, shields, and power-ups. She used timing, waited until 2 drones overlapped, used one's shot to take out the other, threw a metal shard into a joint actuator, used a downed bot as a springboard to vault behind the last. Time, 2:37. When the instructors reviewed the footage, one said, "She isn't trying to win, she's just refusing to lose." The human instructor called her in after day 9. His name was Lieutenant Darius Vent. He had fought in 5 planetary wars, lost most of his platoon, gained a medal no one cared about. "Why are you here?" he asked. She sipped from her hydration pouch. "Because Earth doesn't get invited." "And?" She met his gaze. "So I crashed the party." Darius leaned back. "You know what they say about us, right? Earth? The humans?" She nodded. "Primitive, impulsive, weak, emotional." "Right," he said. "So let's teach them what that actually looks like." She trained with her squad. They weren't bad, but they weren't ready. One, Vrek, the 6-limbed tank, kept overcommitting. Another, Zensha, the floating empath, refused to shoot unless threatened directly. And the last, Klin, the cloak creature, had a habit of vanishing mid-sim, sometimes on purpose. She didn't yell, she didn't instruct, she just showed them. Time after time, she completed the objectives solo. Not because she didn't trust them, because they weren't there yet. Then came Ghost Trial Alpha. Real weapons, real stakes, no restarts. The objective: infiltrate a derelict alien warship and retrieve a data core, defended by drones, traps, and unpredictable variables. 10 squads failed, 3 were injured, 1 quit entirely. Elaine's squad entered last and walked out, calm, intact, victorious. Vrek carried the core. Zensha had 2 new scars but a steady pulse. Klin reappeared just in time to disable a trap. Elaine, she didn't say a word the whole mission, but she smiled, once, when it was over. The footage went higher than expected, not to the Academy, to the Galactic Strategic Council, the same body that once dismissed humanity as a minor tactical inconvenience. The analysts had one question: where did she learn to fight like that? The answer: Earth. No special ops, no secret labs, no enhancement programs, just one girl, and a grandfather with patience, hardwood floors, and a rule: don't fight to hurt, fight to end it. They say strategy is about logic, but fear is what changes doctrine. And what Elaine Mercer taught the galaxy, without saying a word, is that logic means nothing when someone moves before you think. The war wasn't supposed to happen. The Galactic Strategic Council had spent over 900 years drafting treaties, building coalitions, and using long-winded speeches to convince civilizations not to vaporize each other. It worked, mostly, until the Zorenthi cluster collapse, when 6 border systems decided that bureaucracy was just another form of weakness. And so, war began. But this time, something was different. This time, the Council didn't call their usual vanguard. They called Ghost Division. Elaine Mercer stood in the launch bay of a gunmetal grey dropship, surrounded by her squad. They weren't rookies anymore. Vrek had learned restraint. Zensha now shot first and apologized later. Clint didn't vanish mid-mission anymore, just mid-sentence. And Elaine? Elaine had become a ghost in truth. No rank, no uniform insignia, just a face no one ever forgot, and a name no one ever dared say aloud in a briefing unless they meant it. The mission was clear. The Zorenthi Strike Command had fortified a dead moon and turned it into a central command station. It was heavily shielded, unbreachable, unless you weren't trying to breach it, unless you were trying to erase it. Ghost Division's orders weren't to negotiate, they weren't to reclaim, they were to send a message. As the drop alarms blared, Rek grunted. "You really think they'll remember this one?" Elaine checked her gear. "They always remember the first time," Clint hissed. "And the last." Zensha glanced at her. "What if it's both?" Elaine looked out the bay window at the swirling black void, the dead moon in the distance glowing with enemy heat signatures, then said softly, "Then we make sure it matters." What followed was not a battle. It was choreography, the kind of terrifying, elegant sequence that left analysts unsure whether they were watching warfare or performance art. Elaine moved first, always first, through enemy choke points, under laser fire, up grav walls, past kinetic barriers that didn't register someone that small, that fast. Each enemy she met dropped before they could speak. Each sensor that caught her movement blinked and died a frame later. Her team flowed behind her. Vrek crushed an exo unit with one arm. Zensha disabled a barracks with an overload scream that melted screens. Clint reprogrammed a missile mid-flight, just to show it could be done. And Elaine? Elaine reached the core and found someone waiting. General Marnock of the Zorenthi Command stood tall, 9 feet of serrated armor and smug calculation. He had studied her footage. He'd heard the rumors. "Little human," he said. "I was hoping it'd be you." Elaine said nothing. "You really think this changes the war?" Still silent. "I've killed more in a day than your entire planet has deployed in this system." Elaine drew a small blade from her belt. Not a plasma weapon, not a rail-driven cutter, just a blade. Steel, simple, and said, "I'm not here to change the war. I'm here to end you." The final duel lasted 10 seconds. He swung, she ducked, he struck again. She used his momentum, then one slash, one scream, one final impact. He dropped, twitching. She stood, untouched, and said flatly, "War ends when the loudest voice goes quiet." The moon fell 30 minutes later. Ghost Division walked out alone, through smoke and silence, leaving only a single mark behind. A banner painted on a scavenged hull plate. A human handprint. Nothing else. Across the galaxy, war zones went quiet, because no one wanted to be the next one she visited. Military academies updated their files, strategists re-ranked combat classifications, diplomats quietly sent gifts to Earth, and every cadet, in every training hall, learned a new phrase: "If the human doesn't speak, leave the room." Elaine returned to Earth, not for awards, not for parades. She returned to a small dojo behind a broken-down gas station where a dusty mat still waited and a pair of sandals sat by the door. Her grandfather had passed, but his legacy hadn't. She swept the floor, cleaned the mirrors, hung her gear in the corner, then sat cross-legged on the mat. A knock on the door. She opened it. A young alien cadet, nervous, holding a data pad and a water bottle. "Are you the quiet one?" Elaine nodded. The cadet hesitated. "Can you teach me?" Elaine stepped aside and smiled.